Met this girl when I was 10 years old, and what I loved most, she had so much soul. Hey everybody, it's Old School Heart back with another cultural conversation. So first things first, if you are not a subscriber to this channel, become a part of the fam. Hit that subscription button down below. Also, thumbs up this video, like this video if you can. Also, share the video on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever you can share this on social media. I would greatly appreciate it. So today is going to be a light day. We're not going to get into anything heavy, but you all know that when I have our cultural conversations, I always have a little twist to them. I always give my own unique point of view, and so it will be no different with this topic. And so I am not necessarily excited, but I'm anxious to hear what you guys have to say about this topic and what you've heard about it and what your opinion is. And so let's get into today's cultural conversation. Okay, guys, so I don't know if you have been living under a rock, if you haven't been paying attention to social media. I know that there are pressing things that are going on in this world, and you may be really busy. But man, if you have not really paid attention to this Kwame Brown story that keeps building and building and building, you have missed some interesting times. So I'm going to catch you up to speed. And I also want to get your opinions on this because, man, is this a story. So I am back on Twitter, and I told you guys that before. I'm trying to get reacclimated on there, trying to figure out how it all works. I'm also restricted from Facebook for 30 days. So I'm really trying to get back on to Twitter and get my Twitter game up. So a couple of weeks ago, actually a week and a half ago, I'm scrolling through Twitter. I see Kwame Brown trending. I have no idea who Kwame Brown is. I keep seeing him on my timeline. I keep seeing my friends post that they stand for Kwame Brown. They're here for Kwame Brown. And I'm like, who the heck is Kwame Brown? So I was like, you know what? I miss information. So I got to figure out who this man is and why he's trending on social media like this. So I do find some information on Kwame Brown. So he is an ex-NBA player. He's most notably known for being the first round draft pick. And he was picked by none other than Michael Jordan, which I found to be really interesting. And so basically, the reason why he was trending is because of two other ex-NBA players. Now, I know you guys out there, especially our fellas, you are familiar with Stephen A. Jackson and Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes used to play with Kobe Bryant. He played on the LA Lakers, won a couple of championships, NBA championships. For me, he is known as the hothead. To me, he was always the dude that was willing to fight for no damn reason at all sometimes. But I was a big Lakers fan, especially once the Bulls fell off. And I loved me some Kobe, so I used to watch Matt be a hothead all the time. We also know Matt Barnes because his ex-girlfriend, ex-fiance, ended up being in a relationship with Derek Fisher, and that was juicy, that was funny. And we all know that Matt Barnes took his little light butt 2 hours to go fight Derek Fisher over this girl. So, we all know who Matt Barnes is. And Stephen A. Jackson has played on a number of teams, the Clippers, the Nets, most notably known for playing with the Spurs and winning a championship in 2003. Now, I follow Stephen A. Jackson because I saw a post that Fred Hammond, who is one of my favorite gospel artists, posted Stephen A. Jackson smoking weed and listening to his music. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever because he was vibing and smoking weed while listening to the gospel music. So I started following him. And when George Floyd died, Stephen A. Jackson became very vocal. And one of the reasons why he became vocal is because he knew George Floyd. They called each other twin. So they met a couple of times. And basically, he took on the responsibility of kind of becoming George Floyd's daughter's like second dad, and became, really outspoken on George Floyd's death. And so I love Stephen A. Jackson. So Matt Barnes and Stephen A. Jackson have a show on Showtime. It's basically a live podcast called All the Smoke. Now, I've watched a couple of episodes of All the Smoke. It's basically them talking to players, athletes, coaches, rappers, and different things like that. That's pretty much the trend for black men right now. They're really ruling in the live podcast area. And so Stephen A. Jackson and Matt Barnes are doing good with this show. Now, on one of their shows, I guess they had a female guest on there who was an ESPN commentator, I believe. And so she was talking about a trade that happened, and she mentioned two players, one of them being Kwame Brown. And so Matt Barnes, kind of, makes a shot or takes a shot and says only one of the players' names and not Kwame Brown. And so when the lady repeats herself and says, and Kwame Brown, he says the one player again and excludes Kwame Brown. Now, all of us know that that's a shot. Whenever you do something like that and you exclude somebody's name more than once, you're taking a shot at them. You're dissing them. And so basically, I don't know if somebody sent that to Kwame Brown or how he found out about it, but Kwame Brown was not having it. And so basically he took to YouTube and Instagram to express his frustration. Now, I guess this was the time to air it all out. And so basically, Kwame Brown really, really exposed the NBA players, their behavior, and his experience in the league. And one of the things that I found interesting in that first conversation that he had, where he, basically let Matt Barnes have it and Stephen A. Jackson have it, was basically letting us have a front row view of what it was like for him as a player in the league during that time. Now, I did say that he was chosen by Michael Jordan. Unfortunately, that has been an Achilles heel for him ever since he was chosen. One of the reasons I say that is because a lot of people feel like Kwame Brown failed to live up to the expectation that Jordan had in choosing him as the first round draft pick. So basically, people have been able to joke about that, his failure living up to that expectation for the longest time. And so he talked about how, frustrating that was, because Michael Jordan really was not very welcoming to him, and very arrogant and very mean. And when you have somebody like Michael Jordan who picks you as a first round draft pick, you would think that Jordan would be a mentor. You would think that Jordan would take this young man who did not go to college, who went right to the league after high school, and take him under his wing and give him the rope, show him how to do things, show him how to be that all-around great basketball player. And Kwame Brown reveals that Jordan was far from that. Jordan was arrogant. He was mean. He was not very likable, not very easy to work with, especially as somebody like Kwame Brown, who is from North Carolina, I believe South Carolina, grew up, had a rough history, and needed influence in his life and mentorship. And unfortunately, he did not get that from the Bulls. Kwame Brown revealed a lot of things about, the NBA being just an immature fraternity of men who cheat on their wives, men who cheat with other wives, pass other girls and wives around, are very jealous and conniving type of men, backhanded men. And basically, he exposed all of that. He also exposed, the fact that all of these players get to see so much money and not pouring it back into the community. He really talked about that as well. And one of the biggest things that he talked about that I really agreed with was, on a lot of these shows that these black men have now, or have the opportunity to have now, how a lot of time is spent dissing other black men, on critiquing harshly other black men, never really giving other black men their flowers or anything like that, but really being harsh, really being mean and disregarding black men, and how they're basically paid to do that. A lot of these shows on ESPN, a lot of these shows that are on Showtime are all sponsored by white men, white media, and white men and white media love it when they can get other black men to basically diss other black men, because it takes the pressure off them, even though they're the sponsors behind it. Basically, they feel like their hands are off because they're not the ones that are saying it. And so basically he talked about Stephen A. Smith. He talked about Stephen A. Jackson and Matt Barnes, and how they use their show sometimes to critique other men and to down other men, and how irresponsible that is to the community, how irresponsible that is for up and coming black athletes and different things like that. And he also talked about just how even though he didn't necessarily live up to the expectation that they thought he would by being underneath Jordan's leadership, that he still did 13 years in the league, made over $65 million. So at the end of the day, whether or not you thought he lived up to the expectation or not, he still was very influential, because not that many people make it in the league that long. And so basically, everybody just was like, hey, we stand for Kwame Brown because he brought honesty and truth to a conversation that needed to be had. And that conversation basically is respectability politics. We have this thing where we put certain celebrities, certain people on a pedestal, and we are in a culture now that I completely love, that now basically says, hey, just because you are popular or influential and you have this gift doesn't mean that you get to treat people unfairly, doesn't mean that you get to mock people, that you get to feel as if you are better than, and basically that you get to be disrespectful. And revealing that those characteristics in Michael Jordan, one of the things that he said was, he couldn't do that while he was playing in the league. There were too many people who found him or put him on a pedestal and found him to be God. And so he held back, being very wise. He held back on making statements about Jordan. But we're now in an opportunity where we don't care about respectability anymore. If people are being disrespected, if people are being treated unfairly, then they should be called out and they should be told that they were wrong, and that a lot of people need apologies. And so, Kwame Brown really took the internet by storm when he, defended himself, and he should have defended himself, especially when you ain't bothering nobody, you ain't talked about anybody, and here somebody brings you up in conversation and takes a shot at you, and I guess you're just supposed to be quiet about it. So anyway, instead of being humbled men and apologizing like men should do, Matt Barnes basically said, well, number one, I was joking, and number two, you've been made fun of since you got in the league, so I don't understand what the problem is. Matt Barnes, that was the rudest shit that you could have ever said. And I'm glad that now your ass is being handed to you. Kwame Brown refers to him as Becky with the good hair, and I think it's quite hilarious. But for that to be your response, instead of being humble and saying, you know what, I apologize, for some odd reason, we've always made fun of Kwame Brown instead of giving the man props for trying his best in the league, lasting for 13 years in the league, making over $65 million. No, what Matt Barnes decides to do is say, well, everybody picks on you. And I just find that so funny. People always do that, don't they? When you're telling them, you know what, I don't like that. I don't like when you're joking like that. People always go, well, we've always done that with you. It's almost like when somebody, is the roaster or somebody like that, like the Joker and likes to roast people. And somebody says, you know what, I don't like when you say that. And they go, man, we've been doing that to you. It's like, but I just said I don't like it. I get to not like it. I get to say how I feel about it. And I get to tell you to stop. And it just shows Matt Barnes' immaturity when he comes back with that, well, everybody makes fun of you. Okay, Ed, I don't have to like it. And I can say what I want to say about it because you talked about me, and Steven basically, basically, just went with, his buddy, his pal, Matt Barnes, it's all jokes, it's all jokes. And they both felt like they didn't want to give this man a platform. Well, we're not going to help you out. We doing good on all the smoke. We're not about to give you a platform and let you take away from our platform. But you know what I love about Kwame Brown is that he didn't need their platform. His personality, his persona, he's very charismatic. He's funny. He's engaging. He really doesn't need your platform, to be honest. He's basically been able to make his name out there, just by being himself. Just the things that he says, my mama's son, you getting some of mama's recipe. Those are quotes that we are going to be saying for the entire rest of the year. And so really the fact of the matter is he really don't need y'all, and so then we have other people that join in this conversation, even though the conversation is between Matt Barnes and Stephen A. Jackson and Kwame Brown. Here comes Charlamagne the guy and putting his 2 cents on. So Charlamagne goes on to the Breakfast Club, basically just say, do not mess with Kwame Brown. We're from the same area. His father is in jail. His brother is in jail. Their whole family is violent. And he says all of this stuff. Now, in his mind, he thinks that he is helping Kwame Brown by basically saying, his whole family is violent and crazy, and so therefore he's crazy. And I don't think you want that type of smoke. And Charlamagne, we all know that Charlamagne puts his foot in his mouth all the time. But you air this man's personal business to everybody. And you basically said his whole family is dysfunctional, violent, to the point that they've been incarcerated, and you should fear them. How did you help this man? And you said basically, I like Stephen A. I like Matt Barnes. I like all the smoke. And, I'm just telling you now, basically Kwame and his family are crazy. So then, of course, Kwame claps back at Charlamagne the Brown and says, you have no grounds to talk, considering that you have rape allegations out there, in which somehow those went away and you were able to keep a successful show. Basically, he handed his ass to him, and Charlamagne the guy actually apologized and said, he was wrong for it, which is big of him. But the damage that was done, and for the life of me, I do not understand why he thought that was the best response, is to basically air out family business. Number one, it's not your business to air out anyway. And number two, basically what you were saying is the whole family is crazy. And so don't really take to heart what Kwame Brown is saying, because he may be one of the crazy ones too. And I'm glad that Kwame stuck up for himself again and just let Charlamagne ass have it. Because how dare you? Why do you think that that was right for you to say? Why do you think it was right for you to even enter the conversation between grown men? You should have just left it alone. You should have just left the conversation alone. So shortly after that, we have Jemele Hill that enters into this situation as well. She tweets one day that Kwame Brown woke up and wanted to start violence. He woke up this morning and started violence. Basically, that's what she said on the tweet. Kwame Brown woke up this morning and wanted to start violence. And, you know, a lot of people chose violence. Woke up this morning and chose violence is what she said. A lot of people use that now, you know, chose violence. You know, it's like a cliche saying right now. But considering that Charlamagne had just basically came out and said that his whole family was a family that was violent and incarcerated, and basically insinuated that the family and Kwame Brown himself is crazy, for you to wake up the next couple of days and to say that he chose violence only perpetuates the idea that Kwame Brown is unstable, that Kwame Brown is violent, that Kwame Brown is from a violent family, and so we should disregard what he said. And she thought that it was just something light that she could say, not understanding that saying that he chose violence is just basically adding on to the conversation that had been had by Stephen A. Jackson, by Matt Barnes and other people who had entered the conversation. And so she was like, I didn't even mean it that way. It was just a joke from Game of Thrones. Dear ma'am, you're smart enough to understand when words can harm or greatly affect someone. You wouldn't say that certain things like that if it was LGBTQ or feminine women conversations. You would never use certain language because you know better. So for this, why didn't you know better? Why didn't you think that you shouldn't have chose better words? If you wanted to have a conversation about the beef between Matt Barnes, Stephen A. Jackson, and Kwame Brown, you could have had the discussion on them. But you tweeted out that he chose violence. Furthermore, we have to understand something. A lot of times when we're having sensitivity conversations, we exclude black men from those conversations. We include black women, we include black LGBTQ people, but we exclude black men. I'm still trying to understand why we're doing that, because they are also harmed by white supremacy. We won't have Black Lives Matter if it wasn't for all the black young men in general that have died due to police killings, you know, police murdering them. We wouldn't have certain things if it wasn't for black men being incarcerated, wrongfully incarcerated. A lot of times, sensitivity only for some odd reason goes to black women and to LGBTQ. Like black men are not the lead in all of these harmful situations that we are fighting through. And we have to understand that words matter when it involves black men as well. And she tried to defend herself and say, oh, it was just a joke from Game of Thrones. But she knows better. And I think that she should have apologized herself. But Jemele Hill will not apologize. Feminine black women have a hard time doing so, because that means she would be a traitor to the feminist black woman group or the feminist group that she's a part of. And so, she entered the conversation and he let her have it too. He let her have it too. And it's been an interesting week of people getting spanked. People that really believe that they are activists, that really believe that they are making a change in their community, and they're really not. And Kwame Brown basically exposed this love for celebrity that Black people have, and why we need to stop doing that, why we need to stop with the hierarchies, why we need to stop with this respectability thing and see people for who they really truly are, human and flawed. And I'm not saying that he's the best person ever either. I'm sure that, if we peel back layers with Kwame Brown, we'll see mistakes, we'll see flaws, we'll see a lot of things. But, this fantasy that we have in our mind, this idea that we have in our mind about Black celebrity, about, the people that we admire the most, basically the scales on our eyes are finally being taken off, and we're really getting to see that there is real work that needs to be done, and that a lot of these people need a reality check and a humanity check, and they need to really, really, really have a sit down with people like Kwame Brown so they can come back to themselves and realize that they are just like us. They are no different than us. They do not need the admiration and respect that excludes them from scrutiny and criticism. And so basically that's what Kwame Brown has done in the last couple of weeks, is basically expose not only the NBA, but also Black people who we admire. And he's really put pressure on them to do the right thing, to say the right things, and to really, really challenge them to be a part of the community, do better by the community, speak better about the community, and not do the work of white supremacy, which is what some of them are really doing, is basically, aiding in white supremacy's demise of the Black man and the Black community. And so I want to hear your thoughts on Kwame Brown, on Jamel Hill, on Charlamagne the God, Stephen A. Smith. He got on Stephen A. Smith as well, and we all don't like him. But we all know that Stephen A. Smith is going to stay around as long as white supremacy allows him to. And so, huge conversation on the internet. The internet is going ablaze. We know that Charlamagne apologized. We know that Stephen A. Smith apologized. Matt Barnes did not, but he's arrogant and really believes that, he can say and do whatever he wants. And that's why his ass is being handed to him right now. So I want to get your thoughts on the Kwame Brown. Do you agree with him? Do you disagree with him? What about respectability? Are we finally at a point where the exposure of a celebrity is here, that we're really getting to see these people for who they are? Do you think we're there yet? What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on Michael Jordan and his behavior? I want to hear it all. So this is Old School Hard. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the share button, subscribe to the channel. I will see you Wednesday for my thoughts on the last 9 episodes of Where My Girls At. I want to talk to you guys about that. So you have a great rest of the day. I'll talk to you later. This is Old School Heart. Have a good night.